Welcome to Week in Review. Thank you for joining us. You know, sometimes when I'm researching and studying, I'm also looking over at the Weather Channel because I'm trying to discern what's coming. Do you know in the Gospels, Jesus upbraided individuals because they were doing the same thing, looking at the weather, but they weren't discerning the times. We are living in a time where we must discern the times. These are not ordinary times. We're living in a time of, I submit it to you, not to be dramatic, but accurate. These are apocalyptic, fearful times. We're facing a time where people have lost faith in institutions, whether it's political or the media or military or police. And then not only that, but we're facing challenges that are catastrophic. Look at the border and what's taking place, the economy and inflation. We see race relations, what's going on there. Polarization, what's being pushed in our schools, the LGBTQ agenda coming forth with power and ferocity. We also have escalating crime, COVID, variants, go on and on. But you know what? God has hope for us. And in looking back, that's what we see. But I want you to look forward with me. You know what? In my study, I have this. This is, you may be seeing this. This is Jesus with the little sheep and the lamb. And you know what? There is a psalm that is so important for us at this time, and it's the 23rd Psalm. Billy Graham said it was his favorite psalm. And I want to share with you to encourage you in these very difficult and dark days. Here it is. In times of stress, the most popular passage in Scripture, it's the 23rd Psalm. Will you walk through this with me? And I trust, looking forward, this will help us on our journey going forward in victory. Maybe you've heard of a book that came out many years ago and was called A Shepherd Looks at the 23rd Psalm. Millions of copies were sold, and this book helped people gaining insights because what? We don't relate necessarily in an agrarian society and with sheep, but I've been in Wales and England, and I've watched and I've observed sheep, and I've read this book, and there's insights for us to encourage that'll give you hope that God will protect you and provide for you. He will care for you and guide you in these hours. This is important, and I encourage you, tell others about the Week in Review podcast. What does this psalm tell us? Well, first of all, David, this is not just a little poetry from a young boy. He was saying and writing this down in divine inspiration when he was an older man. He had been a shepherd and a warrior and a king. And the Psalms for 3,000 years have been able to strengthen people all over the world. And here's one that I put right at the top. The Lord is my shepherd. Lord means over all, and He is sovereign. That doesn't mean we sit back and say, hey, God's sovereign, whatever comes, or let's just wait for Jesus. No, we're called to be salt and hold back decay and light. But also, He is Lord. He said, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And so He rules, He reigns, but He's called us to advance His kingdom. And He is the Lord, my shepherd. You personalize that and make it your own. You know, there was a little girl that was reciting this in a church service, and she went on to say this, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. She says, He's all I want. I love that. So we want to be consumed with Him as our shepherd. And He said in John 10, I am the good shepherd. That doesn't mean just in character, that means in skill. He knows how to guide us. And you know, when you look at sheep are characterized by three things. They're dependent, they're directionless, and you know what else? I'll tell you, this is a scary one. They are defenseless. Yes, they die of heart attacks. They will starve to death because once they eat the grass and that, if they're not led into the green pasture, they will just stay there. Same thing with, thirst. They'll die of thirst because they don't want to go near waters that are maybe a current or anything. They have to be led and guided. And that's why Jesus tells us that He is our good shepherd. He said this. And so you stay with me. And He said that we can say when we know Him as our shepherd, I shall not want. We don't want to in any way grumble, complain. We can be content knowing He's guiding us. And then we can go to this today. He makes me lie down in green pastures. And that's what He does. He leads us besides what? Still waters. He leads us beside those quiet waters. That's where he wants us to be. Not all tense and frustrated and fearful and bound up in fear and anxiety. Sheep are led beside quiet waters. And then it goes on to say, he restores my soul. When you come to Christ, I think you know this, your spirit comes to a place of rest. You're regenerated. But then there is a soul rest. And when Jesus in Matthew 11, what did he say? He said, come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. That's the gift. That's your spirit reborn. But then he said, take my yoke upon you and learn of me, and you'll find rest for your soul. And that's when we're yoked with him and we're following him in everything, giving no place to sin or any compromise in our life. So we take a clear stand. And then we can say, he guides me in paths of righteousness. No matter what's going on around us today, he will guide you. He is a shepherd. And you know what? He'll do it for what? His name's sake, for the glory of God. Just like Nehemiah, he rebuilt the wall and he did it in record time, but he did it for the glory of God. And that's what we live for every day. Now, the psalmist goes on to say, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Now, what is that? Well, there is an actual place you can go in Israel. It's called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. And sheep don't want to go on that one. And it's a pathway because they can fall off the cliff. They can get in bramble bushes, thorn bushes, and the shepherd will guide them to stay. And he'll do the same thing with you and me in this hour. And it's called the Valley of the Shadow of Death. In order to have a shadow, you got to have light. And the light of the world, Jesus, guides us. His word is a light unto our path in these days, no matter what's taking place around us. And then you know what? He said this, I will fear, the psalmist said, I will fear no evil. We've got to reject fear. God hasn't given you a spirit of fear, but a spirit of love, power, and a sound mind. The thing you fear can come upon you. So you direct your gaze at the Lord and stay in his word, and let's walk in victory, being obedient in this hour. You know what else he says in this psalm? You are with me, and your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now the shepherd had a rod. That was, it was like a big 3-foot stick, and there were times that he had to whack the flank of the sheep to get them back in order. And there's times that he's disciplining his people. Hebrews 12 says, he chastises all those whom he loves. The Father prunes all those he loves so that we can bear more fruit. So don't resist as God's telling you to recalibrate, reset, get the sin out of your life, live in an uncompromising way so that you'll be fruitful and shining bright as a light. Well, it's his rod, but the staff is there for what? When the sheep falls into a pit, that staff is reached out and to pull that sheep out. And also it's to guide. And he's there guiding you. You may say, Larry, I feel like the heavens are brass today and I don't understand all the challenges around us. Remember the famous poem, Footprints in the Sand? And there was a young man and he was grumbling, complaining and saying, Lord, I used to look back and I'd see like on the sand, there were the 4 sets of our footprints and you guided me indirectly. But recently I just feel like I'm not hearing from you. And when I look at the footprints, I only see 2, mine. And what was it? The Lord said, my son, he said, you look back, but he said, you have to realize this, that as you're walking now, there's only 1 set of footprints because I'm carrying you. And he's carrying you. He's guiding you. And he promises this. He says, look, he says, you prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. We face enemies, cancel culture. Jesus said, woe to you if all men speak well of you. Now, we're not obnoxious. We don't want to be, alienating people. We want to be well-informed, winsome communicators of the gospel and truth. But not all people will like when we take a stand. And so we take a stand. We bless those that curse us and pray for those that could use us. And woe to you if all men speak well of you. So we're going forward together in these hours today. And then he said this, you anoint my head with oil. And oh, I love it. God, my cup overflows. Why did the shepherd anoint the sheep and the lambs with oil? It's because there were insects and parasites and he had to keep them clean. He does the same thing with us. And when the sheep bruised his head or whatever, he put the oil on so there'd be no infection. And then when it says, my cup overflows, claim that for your life as you're aligned with God. Believe God. Your cup will overflow. The superlatives that are in the New Testament are fantastic. Peace that passes understanding, abundant life, a joy unspeakable. That when we give, we receive back, overflowing, poured into our lap. This is the abundant life, and we have a shepherd who is directing our steps. And yes, surely, and say this each day, goodness and mercy is going to follow me all the days of my life. And I'm going to dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I wake up each day, and that is really the psalm. I pray and I sing, and I have music, and I say, surely goodness and mercy, claim that, is going to follow you. And you know what? There comes a time and we have to face the reality of death. There's a shadow because there's a light there, but when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we know He's prepared us, He's guided us, and we'll walk right into His presence where we'll dwell with Him forever and then return to earth for a resurrected body, and He will set up His kingdom in a fresh and beautiful way. I want to encourage you. When we take a week in review, it can be discouraging, but get in Psalm 23, meditate on it, live in it, restrict your diet to it for a while so that you're standing strong and knowing the protection, care, guidance, and provision of the Lord. He is the good shepherd, and He's leading you.